Well, good afternoon, everyone. My phone says it's noon, so let's get started. We have the agenda that's been sent out. Kathy also sent out some written materials or testimony that we've received from individuals, primarily on the House rules. Process today, for those of you that are new to the Rules Committee, generally we kind of just act like referees or principals in your elementary school. We get to enforce the rules and interpret them. This is the one meeting we have a year where we have some input into what those rules look like. So we'll go through the proposed House rules, and then we'll move on to the joint rules. We'll pass those out. Well, I assume we'll pass something out that will then go to the House floor and be debated there. Again, just like any bill, amendments can be brought, discussion will be had, and then the full body will adopt those. So let's open the hearing on House Resolution 6004. And we'll start off having Gordon just give us a brief overview of maybe the rules process or why we are here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. If it's okay, I'll just sit here. House Resolution 6004 is a resolution to adopt the permanent rules of the House. The temporary rules were adopted by the House already and are in effect with the adoption of House Resolution 6003. That resolution provides that the permanent rules from the 2021-2022 biennium constitute the temporary rules of the House until the permanent rules are adopted. The permanent rules, as I indicated, are in House Resolution number 6004. They are identical to the 2021-2022 biennium permanent rules, except the standing committee assignments that were made by the Speaker at the beginning of this session. Rules 1101 constitutes the current standing committees and any changes in assignment that the Speaker made, and Rule 1105 is the budget committees with one small change in number of members for that committee, one of the committees. I don't plan on going through each rule. There's 38 pages of rules here. I think after a discussion with the chairperson, the preferred approach is that we will move forward with discussion. And if there's, at the appropriate time, the chairperson or myself will help with any questions, and we'll move from there. And then the rules that are of interest to you specifically will be the ones that I think will be the planned topic of discussion today.
Any questions for Gordon? Okay, any discussion at this point? We will obviously, I know we have amendments coming, or at least that's what I hear. So we don't have any discussion, then let's begin working House Resolution 6004, and we'll start with amendments. So who has an amendment they would like to offer? And we'll discuss that. Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have several, so I'll just start, and then we'll kind of see where we go, and may let someone else go. But do we have those copies, or?
You want them all, or do you want one at a time?
If I could just have them all.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The one I'm going to start with, the one I'm going to start with has to do with our explanation of vote, and my proposed amendment is to, so I guess we'll pass these out to everyone. Is that what you're thinking? Yeah. We can, you know what, we can just take one and pass it. We can, as we learned in elementary school, take one and pass it. Okay, this has to do with an explanation of vote, and it is changing it to all the explanation of votes have to be in by 3 p.m. instead of 30 minutes after the close of session. And if a vote is taken after 2:30, thank you. If a vote is taken after 2:30, then it would be within a half hour. So this just gives people a little bit of time to get their explanation of vote to the clerk. Sometimes we leave session and you run out and there's people that want to talk to you, and before you know it, 30 minutes is over and you haven't had a chance to turn in your explanation of vote. And this is agreeable to the clerk of the House. And so, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we Rule 2505 is amended to what you have in front of you.
Okay, is there a second? Second by Representative Owens. Discussion on the amendment? Yes, yes, absolutely. Representative Heiberger.
I believe we saw this 2 years ago, did we not?
Yes, it was 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Susan Kanar is here with us. And
So previously, for many years, the rule was that the explanations of vote had to be in by 4 o'clock or within a half an hour after adjournment if the vote was taken after 3:30, was the rule for many, many years. 2 years ago, we changed it to the half hour after adjournment, and I've had several members come and talk with me about some of the difficulties that presents. So sort of this represents sort of the language that I had discussed with a couple of members. So the challenge we have sometimes, if we have session at 11 or 11:15 and we vote, sometimes we don't know if members are going to have an explanation. If we do some final action votes, you don't always know. So my clerks may be done with the journal really by 12:30, but they have to wait for 4 hours we can't close it, send it to the printer, all that kind of stuff for another several hours. So that was the genesis of the half hour. And if that's not working, the 3 o'clock sort of is kind of a medium, something in between that. So it still allows some of that extra time for the votes during the regular part of the day, but sort of limits that sort of extenuated time, so to speak.
very good. Any other questions or discussion? Not seeing any. Representative Humphreys, would you like to close?
I close, thank you.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next amendment.
Yep.
wanna keep going?
I'm going to go ahead and I think there's one amendment that we've all been hearing about, and we didn't know what's really going to happen, but I'm just going to go ahead and jump into that one. Yeah, like, have you gotten any emails about anything, people? So what I would like to explain is that I think we have come up with something that I hope will be agreeable to everyone. It's different than what we had first thought that people were urging us to look at. Instead, this language basically mirrors the Senate's language when it comes to votes required for adoption of House resolutions and concurrent resolutions. So what I'm proposing in this amendment is that we say so on and so on, if you're making application, so on. It shall require the number of votes required by the Constitution of the state of Kansas to pass such concurrent resolution. When required by joint rules, a concurrent resolution, okay. Sorry, hang on one second.
That last sentence relates to something that isn't tied to the Constitution. It's tied to the joint rules. So that's why the structure of the sentence, that still requires 2/3. But the ones that are tied to the Constitution, including what you mentioned, are now tied to.
And what might an example of this one be that still requires the 2/3?
Yeah, waiving the 90 days, some of the deadlines that are in the joint rules, et cetera.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Sorry, just had to have a little coaching session there. Okay, so what this does is it's not changing the Kansas Constitution. It's not changing what our rules are as far as are we going to follow the Kansas Constitution. Instead, it is saying that we're going to require the number of votes that are required by the Kansas Constitution instead of saying the 2/3 and having that be the rule. Instead, our rule is, let's follow the Kansas Constitution. That was my thinking, and it mirrors what the Senate says, which I think is appropriate in this case for us both to have the same thing. So I would move that we change Rule 2707 to the amendment that's in front of you.
Second by Representative Smith. Discussion. Sure. Representative Heiberger?
A little concerned about the last sentence. It seems to imply that when not required by the joint rules of the Senate, concurrent resolution doesn't require a 2/3 majority. I suppose, but in your opinion, in reading that with the prior sentence, is it still clear that under the current Constitution, a 2/3 vote would be required to pass a call for a convention of the states?
The way that it's drafted, it ties it to the Constitution, and the Constitution says 2/3.
I will accept your interpretation.
Other discussion? Representative Mon.
I guess my question is, what's the point? If the current rule requires 2/3 and the Constitution requires 2/3 to amend the Constitution, what's the point of the amendment?
The point of the amendment is so that in any jurisdictional question, the Constitution is what is going to prevail instead of the House rules. We're going to look to the Constitution instead of House rules.
Doesn't that go without saying? I mean,
Well, you know, if you know, later, if we're looking at, you know, if we're looking at some litigation, the Constitution is what we need to look at, and the House rules, there's no, I mean, House rules, we can do anything. And so it's really just tying it to the Constitution so that it's, that's what the authority is. So the authority is the Constitution instead of the House rules. I think that's the bottom line.
so if we amend the Constitution, we would then, we wouldn't have to amend the rules, it would just go along with it. Is that kind of?
Whatever it is.
There's also an argument to be made that that the Kansas in applying for a in applying to Congress, the U.S. Congress, to join a convention of states, that the Kansas Constitution wouldn't apply at all. So I guess we would just leave that to the courts to figure out to what extent the Kansas Constitution.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So I think at this point, we're looking to the Kansas Constitution. I mean, we maybe have an opinion by the Attorney General. It's only an opinion. It's not anything but that. So at the moment, we are just absolutely looking at the Kansas Constitution. We're not trying to subvert that or do anything different, and I want that to be clear.
Okay. All right, that answers my question. Thank you.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was just looking at that opinion here. So just to, I think the opinion number is 2019-10. And I'm looking on page 7, last sentence of the second paragraph. So, and really, I mean, so that's an opinion. It's not entirely binding, and hence, you know, so that's the basis of your amendment then, right? It's just to, because the opinion, that line says, but the legislature is bound to that 2/3 requirement by the rules that the legislature itself has adopted, not by Article 2 of the Kansas Constitution. What you want to do is make that.
Mr. Chair, I would just say, again, I think the authority should be the Kansas Constitution and not the House rules. And I like the fact that we would mirror what the Senate says. So I'm really not taking the opinion too much into consideration because, as you've said, and we've said, it's just an opinion, not binding. Thank you.
Representative Heiberger.
Yeah, I guess I'm sure the representative's concerned about whether this is necessary. I mean, if in fact 2/3 vote is required by the Constitution, then nothing we pass here is going to change that. And if it's not required by the Constitution under the interpretation of the Attorney General, which for the non-lawyers on the committee, an Attorney General's opinion has, well, the presidential value, legal value of an Attorney General's opinion is approximately zero. It's one attorney's opinion, and I can cite you several, well, at least one opinion strongly disagrees with the Attorney General's opinion. But, so if indeed the Attorney General is correct, then this would not require us to pass by 2/3, the way I read it. I guess I don't see the necessity of this. I'm really happy that you changed it from what I've heard about the original proposal, because that, and to be honest, I mean, just between friends, it was one of the most outrageous things I've heard since I've been here. But I wish I would have had a chance to review this before the committee, but I don't see the necessity for it, and I will vote against it.
Yes, Representative Mon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I propose a friendly amendment? Is that? Yeah, well, yeah. I
Keep
guess.
talking, we'll see where you end up.
All right. I would like to add, after required by the Constitution of the State of Kansas, the language and the United States Constitution. It addresses my concern about whether or not a vote on the Convention of States requires is directed by the Kansas Constitution or the U.S. Constitution. And so I mean, obviously, this question is going to have to be resolved by a court, whether it's the, and probably a federal court at a fairly high level, but it allows our rules to be flexible to the extent that there's a ruling comes down that says that the U.S. Constitution guides the legislature when taking a federal action, which is like applying to the Convention of States.
Well, so at this point, if he's proposing a friendly amendment, it would be up to the maker and the second to see if they wanted to accept that.
So I think we would say it's not a friendly amendment, because I think the Kansas Constitution and the U.S. Constitution say two different things. That's the problem. That's the issue at the moment. And so I think that needs to be further decided by the court rather than us in our House rules. I would just say, I'd like to leave it at that we abide by what the Constitution of Kansas says.
Okay.
Further discussion. Yes, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to point out that there is some benefit, I believe, to providing some consistency between the House and the Senate rules, if there ever is a challenge. Because if the Senate has different rules and they're challenged, I just think there's a benefit to mirroring this language in both chambers. That way, if there's a challenge, we're both on the same page. If the House has a 2/3 rule and the Senate doesn't, can it technically pass in the Senate with less than 2/3, and is it still a viable resolution at that point? I think this clarifies that, and that's why I'm supporting it.
Any further discussion? Representative Heiberger.
I guess in my mind, I've read the Attorney General's opinion, I've read countervailing opinions. To me, the Attorney General's opinion is irrelevant to this decision. I mean, the Kansas voters in 1974 clearly voted to require a 2/3 vote for constitutional amendments and for calls for a convention. It is clearly based, if you look around what other states do, and if you look at Article 5, which is silent on the matter, what we are doing in our Constitution is not prohibited by the federal Constitution. And so I think it, even though what we're offered now appears to conform with that, I don't think it's necessary, and I will oppose the motion.
Anyone else? Okay, Representative Humphries, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't disagree with my representative here that it's just an opinion. I'm not taking that opinion really into consideration. My purpose in this is just to say, where does our authority come from in if we were to call a convention? I think we need to look to the Kansas Constitution, and I especially like the idea of mirroring the Senate so that knowing it is a controversial issue and things are going to come up, we're on the same page at that point. So I would move my amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just one point of clarification. Have you withdrawn your amendment officially? Just to figure out where we are?
It was a request for a friendly
Just a request for a
amendment,
friendly, okay,
and,
thank you.
She declined.
So you've heard Representative Humphries' motion to amend House Rule 2707. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no.
No.
Motion carries.
And my vote recorded, Mr. Chair.
Yes, votes being recorded. Representative Clayton and Representative Heiberger vote no. Next. Keep going,
I hate to
Representative.
just keep, be the center. I mean, I'm happy to let someone else have a turn.
You were going to say be center of attention, weren't you?
I was going to say that, but.
Keep going. You're good.
Okay, we'll pass this one out. This has to do with Rule 1306, voting in committees. And this basically says that in a final action by a committee vote, that the final action taken will be recorded. Each member's vote will be recorded. I think this, you're jumping in? I think that in the manner of transparency and accountability, that it's a good idea to have our votes recorded in committee. And I don't want it to be a burden. I would like to say, I know sometimes we've thought, well, that maybe that would be a burden in the committee process. I think we can come up with a way that's easy, like maybe a roll call that we just zip through and it doesn't take but 90 seconds or something like that. So I think there's a way. We don't need buttons added to the committee rooms. I don't think we need to raise our hands and have counts. I mean, we could, I'm just suggesting one way to make this work would be but every committee chairman can do it however they want, would be a roll call. So I move that we amend Rule 1306, voting in committees according to what you see in front of you.
With a second by Representative Heiberger.
Yes, I could not argue with anything my esteemed colleague said, and this was on my list too, so I will support it.
Discussion. Representative Smith.
Just wanted to thank you for introducing this amendment. This has been one that has been brought up for a number of years, even going back to John Rubin, and I stand in strong support. Thank you.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this idea. I don't support this amendment at this time because I want to, we actually do have a new committee called the Legislative Modernization Committee. And I would love to have them take a look at this because, I chair the tax committee. We have 23 members, and it would take a significant amount of time if each final action vote. Now, I'm assuming it's just on the bill, not on amendments and things like that. But it would take a fair amount of time to run through that. I would just like a little bit more time. I really like the idea. I like the idea about transparency. I've never tried to hide my vote or anything, anything that I've done down here. But I just want to make sure that we're doing it right and not putting a burden on committee assistants that are already into the process now. We're 2 weeks into the session. I'd like to take a look at this in the committee first.
Representative Clayton.
I guess just one point of discussion that I wanted to bring up is that last session I sat on 3 23-member committees, and it is amazing how efficient it can be. I agree that if it were on every single amendment that it would be difficult, but especially in Fed and State, people are always asking for their votes to be recorded anyway. And so I think our 23-member committee assistants can operate with that type of efficiency, and it'll be a little bit of a growing pain, but I think that this really is doable.
Further, yes, Representative Mon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question is, obviously, in the committee of the whole, you have an opportunity to explain your vote. There may be times when somebody votes to allow something to proceed to the floor without necessarily supporting the bill itself. And would this then require us to add some sort of mechanism to explain our votes in committee as well? Or would that be the logical next step, I guess?
Good question. Further discussion? Representative? Nope. Okay, if there's no further discussion, Representative Humphries?
No.
Representative Heiberger?
Just curious if the revisor had a response to that query.
The actual language here, the proposed change to the rule would not address that. So at this point, in my opinion, it would be up to the committee chairperson on how to, adapt that mechanism into this process.
Representative Owens?
Thank you. I haven't said a whole lot. Maybe I'm just feeling obligated to say something during this meeting. No, I'm just kidding. Sometimes the best thing to do is sit by and listen. So with this, I very much agree with transparency. I think the more transparency we can put in the system, the better. I think that it definitely is not going to be that big of a burden when we figure out a system that works. And I'm also a believer that in the event somebody doesn't want to support it, there is also a substitute motion to pass it out without recommendation. There are other alternatives in the event that an explanation of vote wouldn't be sufficient for their decision to move it out of committee. So I like this idea. I think I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Representative Heiberger?
Question for the revisor. Is it fair to say that Article 13 applies only to standing committees, not the committee of the whole?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Not seeing any further discussion. Representative Humphries, you can close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think all the representatives made good points, and I can see how this would fit in with the Modernization Committee. So I just would ask the committee to vote what your thoughts are, and whatever you decide, we'll abide by. And if it doesn't pass, we'll move it on to the next committee. So I move my motion. Thank you.
Heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Yes, Representative Heiberger and Clayton both vote yes. Next amendment.
Okay.
She's got another one. Representative Humphries.
Thank you so much. This is my last one. This is Rule 3301, and it's under elected member offices. I'll just read it. It's very short. The Speaker and the Speaker pro tem shall be members and shall be elected by the members of the House, except that the Speaker and the Speaker pro tem shall not be eligible to be elected to serve more than 2 bienniums or terms, and except as otherwise provided in subsection B of Rule 3304. This is just putting a limit on the number of terms that someone may serve as a speaker or the Speaker pro tem. And I might just point out that, of course, we can't bind future legislatures to what this might look like, but this would be in the rules. And so if a person chose to want to serve as Speaker or Speaker pro tem for more than 2 terms, then they would need to amend the House rules as we're doing now. And maybe at some point we decide that it should be more permanent and we go the statute route. But for now, I'm just suggesting that we have it in our House rules. And so I would ask that we amend Rule 3301 to the page that's in front of you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Second by Representative
Sorry,
Owens.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Owens seconds. Discussion. Representative Heiberger.
Yeah, I agree with everything, again, my colleague said. I would just point out also that if someone were wanting to try to override it, they would have to do it the session before they plan to do the 3rd term, because this would be the rule in effect at the time of the 3rd Speaker election.
Okay, let's discuss that for just a second, Gordon or Susan. I thought that initially, but are there rules in place when we immediately return? Like, because we adopt temporary rules shortly after we elect a speaker. So are there rules, what rules are in effect when we show up on January 9th at 2 p.m.?
If it's at the end of a biennium, so it's in between bienniums.
Right.
When you show up, you have no rules. It's that when you adopt the temporary rules, is now you have rules, which is one of the first orders of business. Now, that's from a strict standpoint. Obviously, the House has custom and precedent and, you know, the historical nature in which you operate. So when you show up, you are operating under that protocol, even though you maybe don't have formal rules in place. And in fact, even when you're not in session, you sort of operate under those rules as well.
True.
Even at the end of a biennium.
Susan?
I think the protocol is that even before those temporary rules, the protocol really is you're operating under the previous rules, and then because you can't introduce the resolution, I mean, you kind of can't do it any quicker, but the presumption is you're operating, and those are typically the rules from the previous biennium. So that's kind of my inclination, is that you would have to do it before you decided to run again. You'd have to amend the rules sort of potentially mid-biennium.
Okay.
By resolution. That's my thought.
Got it. Other discussion. Representative Mon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a rookie question, I guess. Having not served before, could you give me some history as to why this is a problem or why this is needed or necessary, or whether it's become a problem in the past?
Thank you for the question. I don't think it's necessarily been a problem, but we had a longstanding tradition of speakers serve for 2 terms. And then clearly our previous speaker decided to run again, and he did 3 terms. And he said, I'm only going to do 3, and that's what he did. And, you know, we agree. I think the thought is if we do not have it in rules or statute, then we might end up like the state of Illinois or the state of Washington, that the speaker has been there for 30 years. So it's really just a matter of kind of putting in our rules what we have historically had unofficial tradition. And I had a good number of people ask me for this amendment, by the way.
Representative Mon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just another, I guess, rookie question. Rather than amending the rules in the session previous, could somebody suspend the rules at the time of the speaker's election in that term? Is that something that's possible? I'm just saying.
Good question.
General head nodding, but no. Okay. All right. Well, I guess I was.
They could certainly try, and the body decides what its rules are, and at that time, there'd likely be some sort of vote to determine.
Okay, just curious
Yeah.
as to how that
No,
works.
good question. Further discussion. Okay, you can close, Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say, yeah, the rules could be suspended. It's just a little bit bigger bit of a hurdle if someone wants to change and run for an additional term. That's what this is in place for. Eventually, it might be that we want to put it in statute, but for now, like I said, this is just it's just a little bit of a bigger hurdle. And it's not insurmountable, but it would be harder for someone to do. And so I think that was the point. Okay, thank you, and I move my amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The motion, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. Motion carries. Who's up next? Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll get this handed out here. Stand by. Well, now we have to split them and go part that way and part this way, I guess. All right, can I explain my amendment?
Yes.
All right, very good. So basically what this does, we all know, well, some of us may know that we have a PAYGO provision in the current House rules, but Currently, it says the provision of subsection shall not apply if the ending balance state general fund for ensuing fiscal year is equal to 7.5% or more of the total amount authorized to be expended. I propose to doing away with 7.5% requirement. I think that, it's going to be very easy for people to go on spending sprees with $2 or $3 billion in the bank. And I think that we need to have it very clear that if you want to adjust the budget that has been approved by the appropriations and by the Ways and Means on the Senate side, that we need a provision that says you're going to pay as you go. You're going to find somewhere else to take it from if you're going to change it. And I think that should apply across the board, not only with the 7.5% rule in place.
Is there a second? Oh, make your motion. I guess.
Oh, I make my motion. Thank you.
Is there a second? Second by Representative Humphreys. Discussion. Representative Heiberger.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I oppose this. I mean, the way this works in practice is it really shuts out majority of members from discussing the appropriations bill, whether it's, it didn't last year because we had the 7.5%, but when pay goes in effect, then the decisions are made by the Appropriations Committee, or they're made by the Senate Appropriations Committee, and they stick their bill in a conference committee report, and we don't get it debated at all. So this further reduces the likelihood that all of us who have equal responsibilities to our members get to discuss appropriations, which is one of the most important things we do here. So I will oppose the amendment.
Representative Owens.
Yeah, to follow up to that, this doesn't change. I mean, all this does is say if you're going to spend money, it's got to come from somewhere else already in the budget. And it doesn't minimize anybody's voice. It doesn't, what it does is it minimizes the number of hands in the cookie jar and just says that we need to be accountable when we make a recommendation to spend money, that it comes from somewhere else.
Representative Clayton.
I mean, to be perfectly fair, so not all of our members are on approps. I've never been on approps, but I have been on budget committees before. And so I understand where you're coming from, right? Talking about minimizing the amount of hands in the cookie jar, but all of us were duly elected. All 125 of us have power of the purse, and to eliminate said hands in the cookie jar disenfranchises the people that those who are not on approps represent. And so for that sort of representation, transparency reason, I will be opposing this. I've been in positions before budgetarily where a very previous speaker several back would not allow us to even discuss the budget on the floor. It was just in conference committee. And at that time, I was outraged, and rightfully so, because I was unable to represent my constituents who deserved to have me as their representative bring amendments, or at least propose amendments to that budget. So I think that this is a bad precedent for democracy. Although well-intended, in the Rules Committee, we tend to look at a lot of these unintended consequences, and that's one that causes me major concern. Thank you.
Representative Heiberger. Oh, no. Further discussion. Representative Owens.
I'll just follow up on that, only to say, if there's a single person in the legislature that doesn't believe that there aren't areas within the budget that money can be taken from one area and put to another in a different priority, that would ultimately be the will of the body to make that decision based on whoever brings that amendment forward. So I move my motion and close if there's no additional comments. Sorry.
Yeah, Representative Mon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Again, there was a comment made when we first came in about having a freshman on the Rules Committee being unusual. This may be why. Because while I think I understand the intent here, could I just get a brief explanation of maybe the history of this and how it actually works? Not necessarily the history, but how the pay-go worked before and how it would work going forward.
Sure. Gordon, do you have a history lesson for us?
Well, I'm prepared, and so I brought Jill Walters.
Oh, I wondered why
Yeah,
Jill
well,
was here.
Jill is our budget reviser, and so I'm going to defer to her and allow her to talk a little bit about, especially the part of the question that relates to how this works.
So I must admit, I don't remember what year this went in, so I would have to do the research to find out what year, but it has been, I would say it's been at least 5 or 6 years. So how this would work, sir, is I'm just going to make this up. So if you would want to give the revisor's office $10,000 for maybe more printing costs or something like that, you would have to find $10,000 elsewhere. So maybe you would just look at the operating expenditure of KDADS and think maybe they could absorb that because they have a big budget. So you would subtract $10,000 from somebody's line item budget and add, and these would be SGF funds, and add it into another agency.
So it would basically, wouldn't change how that pay-go goes. I guess the question is more to how the 7.5%, and how this changes the way the body would actually,
So, yeah, so
business.
currently, PAYGO only applies if we have, if the ending balance is equal to or more than 7.5 of total expenditures. And so if we strike this language, then PAYGO always applies, no matter how much is in the ending balance.
so when you said it was 7.5%, more or less, is that, I mean, if this budget is within 7.5% greater or 7.5% less than last, is that?
So if I might.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so,
Yes.
so if the ending balance, our cash reserves, if you will, is equal to or greater than 7.5%,
Okay.
then PAYGO applies. What I'm proposing is that PAYGO should apply all of the time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to correct that, it doesn't apply. Yeah, it doesn't apply if the 7.5%.
And I'm sorry if I sound unprepared, but if I knew this was coming, I could have looked it up a little bit beforehand. So.
Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Owens, now you can close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close and move my amendment.
You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. No. Motion carries. Votes being recorded, Kathy, Representative Clayton and Representative Heiberger voting no. 23 more. Any further amendments? My turn? Now it's Representative Heiberger's turn.
Most of mine will be a little simpler than some of these. So Gordon, can we start with 701? Or you give me the whole pile? Okay. Oh, they're all together. All right.
Do you want me to look through them for you?
Well, no, they're all printed together. So may I do these?
Yeah, we'll certainly take them one at a time. Yeah, just reference the rule and we'll work our way through them.
Okay. I'd like to start with Rule 701 on the first page. Oh, wait. Okay, now strike that. Can I start with 1304? Oh, no, wait. Gordon, do you have 1304 requested by Representative Fairchild? Do you have number 1304 is requested by Representative Fairchild? Well, I've got it. Well, there are two.
Is that it? Here.
Okay, we'll run this. 1304, pretty simple. It just requires that for committee minutes, when a person requests introduction of a bill, then the name of that person introducing the bill and the name of any person, organization, or entity on whose behalf the request is made is reported in committee minutes. So that seems pretty straightforward to me. It's it increases the transparency of our committee actions.
That's a motion on Rule 1304. Is there a second? Second by Representative Clayton. One question for me. So tell me how this is different than what we're currently requiring to request a bill.
That is a good question. I would defer to Gordon on that. It may actually be similar to something else in the minutes.
Committees have different rules, but what this would do would institutionalize that the requested by would be recorded in the minutes.
Oh, okay.
And this is not elsewhere in our rules at this point. Right.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Representative Heiberger, you can close.
I think this is just a basic element of transparency. I think our people who sent us here need to be able to find out what we do, and I think this will it will prevent bills from being introduced by mystery actors. And so I would move my motion.
Okay, you've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. Motion carries. Next one. Yes, Representative Clayton and Heiberger vote yes. Kathy, for the minutes. Yes.
All right, let's go to 701, which is just a minor adjustment to our current midnight rule. No, wait. Let's go to 101, I'm sorry. 101, yeah, minor adjustment to our midnight rule. The current rule says that no meeting may continue after midnight, except that if a item is under discussion, then we can continue until that item is finished. This says that that's the case only if the item is introduced before 11, which would prevent the introduction of a very complex, lengthy bill at 11:59, so that we're conducting important deliberations in the middle of the night. So just a minor tweak to the midnight rule, and I would move the amendment to 101 as shown in the handout.
Is there a second? Representative Clayton, discussion? Representative Owens.
I'm not going to support it. I think honestly that the legislature needs to get the work done when the legislature needs to get the work done. And to further restrict our time period, I mean, we could all say we need to be in bed by 10 o'clock and make it 9 o'clock. I think it's fine the way it is, and I could probably make a good case to even eliminate the midnight rule altogether, but that's just me.
Representative Heiberger.
With all due respect, this isn't about me wanting to go to bed. This is about transparency. It's about not doing our work in the middle of the night when the people who send us here can't watch. It's about respect to our staff, who we make stay up all in the middle of the night. And we signed up for this, they didn't. And it's also about, I'm sorry, that's it.
Representative Owens.
Yeah, my apologies, Boog. If there was no offense intended on that whatsoever. I was just kind of making a point about we could move it earlier. We could make it 9. We could make it 8 because people want to go to sleep. So I apologize if there was any offense taken.
Representative Clayton.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this, one of the main reasons why I support the midnight rule is, again, as the bringer of the amendment said, is that I think every single one of us on this committee follows the rule that it's never about us, it's always about the people that we represent. And so when we look at it from that standpoint, I've been in here for a while, and some of the weirdest stuff that we pass is in the middle of the night, and then my constituents wake up in the morning and they go, oh my God, what did you do? So I think we have increased transparency by at least having our proceedings available on YouTube for people to view, but I also think that most of our constituents, aren't, staying up for third shift to see what we're doing. And so I always think that better transparency is done in the light of day, and so I will support this.
Gordon or Susan, let's say we take up something that seems like it's not going to take very long, and we start at 11:15 and it ends up being midnight. What happens? What if we don't suspend the rule? The clock strikes. Are we just get up and leave?
I think that's correct. Otherwise, you're in a violation of your rules. Now, because you are a self-governing body, you're violating your own rules. So if someone would have to object that you're still going, it wouldn't just, time wouldn't stop. I think someone has to allege that there's a rules, a point of order, essentially. But unless you suspend it, I think you have to stop.
Representative Heiberger.
But the rule states that the meeting would continue until the question is disposed, whatever question was on in front of the body. Is that not accurate?
Well, but you've already taken up the question, but you've taken it up after 11 p.m. So I started 11:15, think we'll be done at 11:45, but it hits midnight. Then we run into an issue, I think. Further discussion. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this just complicates the issue a little bit. I'm not sure when I mean, you can always do a point of order, but a motion to suspend the rules when you've got a question on the table, I don't think is in order. But I think this complicates it a little bit. I like having the midnight rule in there. It leaves us some flexibility to when we do need to suspend the rules, just to finish up some business and not continue into another legislative day that costs even more money. It allows us that, and typically having the rule in place has been enough of a roadblock. If we know we're getting close, we wrap up business unless it looks like there's just one day left or one item left on the agenda, and we can get that taken care of in short order. So,
Further discussion. Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering if we have clarification on that, if we're in the middle of discussing a bill, can we then suspend the rules in the middle, or do we do it in between bill discussions, motions?
You wrote Mason's, Susan. Don't you know the order?
But I don't have it with me.
I didn't bring Mason's either.
I mean, it is not under 2301, which gives you the precedence of motions, suspension of rules is not there as a precedential motion, so that's probably not in order. I couldn't remember, I hadn't looked up my 2301, so you can get a gold star for that. I mean, it would be up to like I said, it would be up to an objection if it's, it depends if someone objects and makes the point of order.
Right.
If they do, I think you're kind of stuck.
Okay, further discussion. Representative Heiberger.
Well, I think if we get in that situation, then the answer is a motion to adjourn, which can be made at any time. I think this is, again, I think doing our work in the middle of the night is not good for us, good for our constituents, or good for anybody. I would move my motion.
Got the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no.
No.
Motion fails. Those voting yes, Representative Heiberger, Clayton, and Mon. Which means it was a tie and the chair votes no. Next.
Here's one that the chair might not like also, 1302.
Which one? You said 1302?
Yes. Again, I'll just preface this with a short remark. I spent 6 years in city government before I came here, and it's my perception that if we ran things in city government the way we run them here, they would kick us all out and we would deserve it. I think the way our system is set up, it gives far too much power for one person, whether a committee chair or a speaker, to thwart the will of the majority. And so this is one minor step to correct that. It would allow a 2/3 vote of committee to require the holding of a hearing on a bill that's before the committee. Again, I understand the need to have, for committee chairs and the speaker to have power to control the agenda, because we have way too many bills here than we can hear in a year, and they need to have the authority to regulate that. But I think this would be used very, very sparingly, but I think there are situations where, and would note, this is a supermajority, not a majority of the committee. This would allow something that's of importance to a supermajority of a committee to get a hearing.
Motion.
Yes, it
Is there a second? Representative Clayton, discussion. Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little bit confused. What I don't understand is the chairperson says, okay, we're going to decide if we're going to have a hearing on this bill. Let's see how many people want to have a hearing on this bill. And then we see if it's 2/3. Or I don't understand how like a person on the committee, a member, would say, hey, let's have a 2/3, let's have a vote if we're going to have a hearing on the bill.
By motion.
They would move that,
Mr. Chairman, I move that we hold a hearing on HB whatever. And then let any of the revisers or the clerk, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that would be a permissible, the way the procedure would work in the committee.
just in any time during a committee meeting? Or does the chairman have to ask for motions, or?
Well, I think the chairman and women recognize people.
Chairperson, yeah.
Yeah, chairperson is recognized people at various points in the meeting. I don't see that as an issue, but.
Okay, okay, thank you for that clarification.
Would the committee dictate when the hearing is, or would that still be up to the chairperson?
I don't see anything in the current language that would allow the committee to determine the hearing time.
So while this may make sense, if I don't like your idea, I set it the day before the last day for committees to meet, and nothing really comes of it.
That's certainly possible if the chairman.
I mean,
if a chairman.
I give your bills hearings, just,
I know, but if a chairman wanted to disregard his members that way, then one could do that. But again, I think this is kind of a nuclear option anyway. I don't think a committee is going to do something like this, except in fairly extreme circumstances. So.
Further discussion? Seeing none. Representative Heiberger, you may close.
I move my motion and close. I close and move my motion. How about that?
Representative Clayton seconded. Okay, you've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. It appears to be tied. I'm going to vote, I like the idea, but I'm going to vote no. This is one likely lots of yours. Lots of merit, let's keep working on them. I think there's things we can do, but in this instance, I'm not sure it's going to help.
We may see it on the floor.
Okay, perfect. Next.
This is a companion version. This is a companion. We probably should have run these together, but actually, I would like to just run section B of 1306. And it applies to final action rather than hearing. And it probably should state that it's final action on a bill that has been heard in a committee. So can I make a friendly amendment to my own motion?
Depends if the maker thinks it's fair.
Yeah, is it friendly to you?
He's of a split mind on that.
So it would be final action, and we'll give Gordon some leeway, but basically saying final action on a bill that has been heard shall be taken on any bill, ...
Right. And so
Okay.
the motion would be just section 2 with that amendment to it. And it's just a parallel to the motion we just discussed. And again, it just allows a supermajority of committee to overcome blockage to a bill. And it would really be a nuclear option, I think, and wouldn't be used very often. But I think it's important to have that protection for the majority there. It's not even protection for a minority; it's protection for a majority. So,
Okay. Motion by Representative Heiberger, second by Representative Clayton. Discussion. Sorry about that. Representative Smith.
Just point of clarification, do we have pretty good direction? Does the reviser feel okay with, they understand the intent? I don't like voting on things that I can't see the language for, but I'm willing to.
Yeah, Gordon.
That's correct. I think we can just add a few words. Final action shall be taken on any bill that has had a hearing for which a motion has been approved.
Further discussion. Seeing none, Representative Heiberger, you may close.
I close and move my motion.
Heard the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries? Division? Did you say division? Okay. Yes votes, Heiberger, Clayton. And on the last one, which they didn't request it, but I'm sure they'd like to have their votes recorded on that one too.
Okay, this next one will be a little more fun. Rule 1102, which I guess I'll ask a rhetorical question. How many people on this committee knew before a month ago that our rules did not allow for the minority leader to appoint minority members of our committees?
I thought that, yeah.
I, in fact, assumed it was there. But in fact, it was during the events of the last month, it was brought to my attention that the rules don't say that. I think, the way, the way the rules stated now may have been appropriate 100 years ago or even 50 years ago, but I don't think it's appropriate now. I think it is a clear expectation that party leaders ought to be able to appoint the members of their parties to committees. And this does provide an out. If you look on the next page, it continues. It allows the speaker to replace a member of the minority party for good cause. So if there's somebody who's disruptive and the minority leader doesn't do anything about it, then the speaker could take action. And of course, it leaves the speaker with full authority over appointments to the majority party. So I think, again, every one of us has constituents who sent us here. Each of them deserve equal representation. And I think allowing one person to disenfranchise any of our constituents is inappropriate. So I would move the amendments to 1102 that are shown in the handout.
Second by Representative Clayton. Discussion? Representative Mon.
Thank you. Again, just a sort of a newbie kind of a question. Has this been a problem in the past, or has there been some type of collaboration between the speaker and the minority leader in general?
It was not a problem until I announced my intent to run for Speaker of the House in accordance with the state statute, which directs both parties to nominate candidates for Speaker. After that, it was suggested by the other Speaker candidate that, well, I was told something I'd never heard about, nor had anybody I talked to heard about, a supposed gentleman's agreement from 50 years ago that allowed the minority party to appoint its own members of committees if they did not run a candidate for Speaker. And I think, to me, it's the notion that a party would have to bargain for the right to appoint its own committee members is outrageous, frankly. And so it has not been a problem. The only problem is that I didn't get to run for Speaker, which is not a great tragedy.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a question. So right now, I understand that it's kind of been a gentleman's agreement about who is appointed from the minority party, but has it also not been in our rules that the proportional representation, that's also just been a gentleman's agreement?
It's nowhere in the rules that I see, and please let me stand corrected by
The statutory.
Representative Clayton.
If you're talking about proportional representation, are you speaking in regards to how many members of the minority party versus majority party get committee members? So for instance, the proportion that would be on, like, say, Fed and State and tax. So I can speak to that, having been, so in 2019, when I switched parties, that technically meant that the minority really had more and should have gained one more seat on each of those large committees, but the speaker at the time did not grant that. So I don't recall it being in the rules, because if it was in the rules, but then again, Gordon, you might want to clarify, that could be, and now I'm going down a, rabbit hole, but it's rules, it's what we do, so.
That is correct. Often, when there is a proportionality rule in the statute or in the rules, like in the Senate rules, it does not require a reshuffling if someone does choose to switch parties in the middle of a biennium. But The proportionality in the House is not in the rules, but it's been exercised. The chart has been utilized, but it's not required.
So, can I finish?
Sure, Representative
Thank you.
Humphrey.
So just to kind of continue, I'm not opposed to that piece being in the rules. I think that is a good idea. And I remember, Representative, when that happened, and I remember the thought being, you were elected in the majority party, and so that's how it was going to stay for that biennium, rather than changing it, and maybe even going off what the Senate rules were too, looking at that, because we didn't have those specific rules. So I remember that discussion, and it had to do with how you were elected. So
I think it was what the speaker cited, because freedom of association does exist. And so, and again, it all kind of depends, but I mean, I think that at that time, it was the speaker's interpretation and no set rules, at least not in our rules. I don't know. Again, I didn't bring my copy of Mason's, and it's fairly unprecedented, but obviously, given what some other members have done, not entirely unheard of.
And so if I just may finish up real quick. So I'm not opposed to having, I mean, I think that's interesting. The sentence before that, I have a little bit of angst about, and I certainly have some about the sentence on the following page, because I just, good cause shown. I mean, I know that that's a legal term, and we look at that, but I do feel like, in my opinion, the speaker should have the ability to replace a member of the minority party for some reason. And I know you say good cause shown. Is there going to be a difference of opinion on what that good cause is? So generally, I'll say I'm going to vote against this, but I'm not opposed to that one piece being in there, because I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Representative Heiberger.
I appreciate that. And the reason I put the last phrase in there is just because I didn't want, I thought it was clear that the speaker did need to have some authority to take people off the committee if the minority leader wasn't dealing with the problem. And it's with respect to the, I'm losing my train of thought many times today. I would be open to a friendly amendment to cover the situation of party changing. But I guess if you're going to vote against it, you're probably not going to offer a friendly amendment.
So let's go back to this good cause shown. So say, I don't know, days are already running together, but the other day we had 5 or 6 committee members apparently gone for some reason, and so there were 5 or 6 committee spots. Instead of you on Judiciary today, I get Representative Smith. Are we going to have to show good cause every time there's a temporary appointment of a different member to a committee? Is there a rule that deals with temporary appointment? Because usually it's like on this day only.
The speaker still retains, the way I read the rules, speaker still retains authority to appoint members of the majority party in all cases, so he could replace majority members, and then the speaker would nominate the Democratic replacements, which is what we do now.
Okay. Representative Munn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question about that last sentence, except that the speaker may only replace a member of the minority party. So the speaker gets to replace members of the majority party at will without for good cause or no cause.
Well,
welcome to the legislature.
Yes. Needs good cause for the minority.
That's the way it has been working. If you would like to amend it to include majority party members, that'd be fine, but I think that would increase the opposition on your side of the aisle. But
It could be resolved by simply saying, member at any time for good cause shown. Take out the first part of your...
I'd accept that as a friendly amendment, if you want to make it.
All right, I will request that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, so wait, what did we just agree on? Oh, wait, does your...
So on page 2, it would say member at any time, and then we would strike, except that the speaker may only replace a member of the minority party for good cause shown. And so you would delete everything from except to party, and so the final proposed rule change would be that the Speaker may remove or replace any committee member at any time for good cause shown.
And you're good with that? Are you good with that? Okay. Discussion.
Maybe I'm throwing a monkey wrench.
Representative Owens.
Yep, I'm not good with that. And that's okay, we each have a vote. That's the beautiful part about the work that we're doing here and the work in the legislature. It seems like to me that there is a concerted effort to erode the authority of the Speaker of the House, and I do not support that. Thank you.
Representative Clayton.
I mean, I will just say, so I'm on my third speaker now. I have seen speakers remove members of the majority party from committee right in the middle of floor action in a pretty humiliating way. Sometimes done just through, honestly, a lot of times here we make emotionally charged decisions, and I think one of the things that keeps those types of decisions from being made are rules like this. And so that's part of the reason why we have this, right? It protects the people that we represent, but it also kind of keeps us in check as well. So big fan of checks on power, and I've seen weird stuff happen. And the majority party doesn't necessarily get protection from their speaker. Oftentimes we have seen both in the majority and the minority where we get a leader that's elected, by only one vote. And sometimes that, sometimes people can be pretty chill, and then once they get a little bit of power, they start acting somewhat tyrannical. And so I think that this is a good protection for, just it de-emphasizes emotional decisions, which I think is always wise. We are a body that functions on logic, or at least we try to.
Further discussion. Representative Heiberger, you may close.
Thank you, and I appreciate Representative Owens' comments, but I don't think we can expect to achieve small d democratic outcomes with undemocratic means. I think the rules that we have them written now are undemocratic in a lot of ways, so I would move my motion.
Heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. Yes, which
As
is now
amended.
the motion. Yeah.
Are we voting on the motion or on the amendment to the motion?
No, we didn't have an amendment to the motion. We had a friendly, the motion was changed.
My motion was intended to be the motion as amended.
Okay, so you don't vote on friendly.
It just becomes the motion. Yeah. Right. Okay, so I believe it was tied again, and the chair votes no. Motion fails. Next.
Just two more short ones. 1309. This would reverse a change we made to the rules 4 years ago. At that time, a bill could be withdrawn from committee by an affirmative vote of 70 members. That was changed by a vote of this committee. This amendment would turn it back to 65 members. Again, it's just allowing a majority of the members of this body to adequately represent their constituents.
It's a motion. Is there a second? Representative Clayton, discussion? Representative Smith.
Just a little bit of history. Are these numbers arbitrary? Where did we get the 70? Where did we get the 65? Why is it not either a standard simple majority or two-thirds majority as we usually follow in some of the other rules? I'm just curious where the numbers came from.
Historians? Anything out there?
I don't believe it was ever 65. I think it was a majority. I need to look up my rules, but I don't ever remember the number 65 ever being anywhere in rules. It would either be a majority of members elected or appointed or members present. I don't ever remember a rule having 65 in it.
Oh no, I have not that old of rules. I've got older rules, but not that far back. Any other discussion? Okay, Representative Heiberger, you may close.
I close and move my motion.
Heard the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion fails. Affirmative votes being recorded. Representative Clayton, Representative Heiberger. Next.
Last one. Actually, this one was brought to me by somebody on the warm side of the aisle. And I'll tell you that story if you haven't heard it before. So. I can tell it real quick if anybody's interested. I heard this from Representative Finch during my orientation. He told the story of why the majority party sits on the south side of the building. Back when this building was first built, the heating wasn't very good. On those cold winter days, it was warmer on the south side of the building. That's why the majority party sits there, according to Representative Blaine. Okay. This would change the number of hands needed to call a roll call on the House floor from 15 to 10. You know, if it's up to me, I would roll call everything, but this just slightly reduces the number of people needed to require a roll call vote. It's pretty simple.
Okay, there's a motion, second by Representative Clayton. Discussion. Representative Humphries.
Thank you. So my question is, I mean, have we ever like not gotten to 15? I mean, it seems like it's either kind of all or nothing, or, I mean, has it ever been 12 and we didn't do it? I'm just curious.
I don't recall seeing that in my time here.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, Representative Heiberger, you may close.
I close and move my motion.
For the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion fails. Oh, yes. Same votes, Kathy. Okay, does anyone else have an amendment? Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do, and so this is the only amendment that I have, and it's a change to Rule 4305 regarding open meetings.
Would you like to start explaining?
I absolutely
as
can.
it's coming
Thank
around?
you. All right, so as you can see, what we did last biennium, and I think that a lot of this was largely done more due to COVID. So those of you who served during that time, we, by necessity to prevent the, the spread of disease, we spread out quite a great deal on the floor, up in the gallery. Sometimes people were, unless they were taking final action, were even in their offices. And so because of that, it was very necessary for both sides of the aisle, both the majority and the minority party, to be able to communicate, especially with mass texting, right? So we would do that to get members onto the floor for final action when a lot of them felt more safe being in their offices unless they absolutely had to be there. Now, far be it from me to say that COVID is over, but the way that we conduct our business is very different now. We're back to the old way where we're all on the floor together. And so, I don't, I know how to count. I know that we don't have the numbers to do this, but part of the reason why I'm bringing this is that I think that we did kind of depart from precedent when we allowed the majority party to communicate in this way, and that being whoever the majority party is. I think we're kind of going back and really declaring that, all right, our COVID protocols for operating are over. And I don't think it's fair for a supermajority to be able to have the same advantages as the minority. I think, that's just basically like the supermajority saying like, oh, hey, well, let's just go ahead and, give us the extra advantages. You guys don't necessarily need that. We need to continue to depart from the old COVIDian way of doing things. I think that kind of caused harm to the way that we tend to do our process, and I would go ahead and move my amendment. That's the explanation as to my logic behind it.
Got a motion by Representative Clayton, second by... Shouldn't have waited him out.
Sure?
Representative Heiberger. Discussion. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually support this with, I'd like some clarification from the reviser office, because it appears that there could be potential, since we are the majority party, there is communications going to a majority member of the members of the business before the committee. Is this an open meetings violation? Is there any concerns there that we have to
No,
be?
because the open meetings law gives us the ability to set rules governing ourselves according, if you pull up KSA 7543, as it starts there at the beginning, we're allowed to set our own rules dealing with Open Meetings Act. We could exclude ourselves from all open meetings laws if we wanted to, if we adopted them by rule.
I mean, I will say, just because we can,
Agreed.
doesn't mean we should.
No, right. So we can do this, is the short answer. Not saying it's
and
right or
I
wrong.
know we can, because obviously we did it during the COVID period, but I guess I would just like to see a little bit more transparency, and I hate cell phones, so. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you. So a point of clarification. So your amendment is to say it's okay for the minority party to use cell phone texting communication, but it's not okay for the majority party.
Yes, it is, because that kind of, follows clarification for other communications that we can have as well. So I think that it matches fairly well. So for instance, if we are all within committee, it is, perfectly fine, and I've certainly done it before as, when I was ranking on a committee, I had a group text and a group chat. That's always been something that the minority party has been able to do, at least in my understanding. Gordon, if I am incorrect, I would like you to correct me, but that is based on my understanding. Minority party has always been able to do that type of communication.
And the majority party has not been able to do that?
Not until we put that into place in this rule, and so I want to strike it to bring it back to the way that it was.
Okay, can we get a little information on when the minority party was able to have a group text during committee, but the majority party wasn't?
So I don't believe, Gordon, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe the permission was specifically in the rules for either party until we amended them. But under the Open Meetings Act, the minority party wouldn't be a majority of a quorum, and so it didn't apply. Go ahead, Gordon.
Correct. When you're dealing with this issue under COMA, you define what is a public body, and in the case that you indicated, a committee would be a public body. So if a majority of that body communicated, there could be, depending upon the circumstances and what was discussed, there could be a violation of the open meetings. Now, that would apply to, you add up both parties. So it could be, as long as it was a majority, it could be a combination of both parties. But if, just by numbers, if the minority party were to communicate, that would not constitute a majority of the body.
Okay, so that begs the question of why do you need permission to do that then? Because if you can do it anyway because you're a minority, then you don't need permission to do it.
I mean, I guess technically I could revise my amendment to strike the entire rule. Instead of just striking majority, but I don't know what sort of unintended consequences it would have. I mean, for instance, from the moment that I joined the minority party, and again, because we never were a quorum of the body, we have always had some sort of communication or group chat going on. So this was simply put in effect, 2 years ago to really make things easier for, by necessity due to our new COVID protocols, for the majority party to be able to communicate in the same way, even though you all obviously constitute a quorum.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if this is appropriate. I'll let you roll on this, but I would like at this time to make a substitute motion to strike all of Rule 4305 following the third sentence. So you'll have the first three sentences ending with the last sentence, caucuses of the House minority party may be closed as determined by the minority leader, and striking the rest of the rule.
And so just question about your intent. Obviously, since the minority party doesn't really need permission to send these electronic communications. So we can still do it, obviously, but, so still the same intent, just cleaning up the language.
Mr. Chairman, yes, and I think it's important that both caucuses have the authority to close their meetings if necessary. That's why I wanted to leave the first part of those sentences, or the first part of the rule, and strike the rest.
Okay, is there a second?
Sure, I'll accept that.
Okay, so we've got a substitute motion and a second. Any discussion? Representative Humphries.
Thank you. So I do have a quick question, Gordon, as far as, like, for instance, if our caucus was texting, you have a caucus meeting on Tuesday at 8 o'clock, that's okay. That doesn't interfere with the Open Meetings Act, as long as people aren't going back and forth saying, well, I hope we discuss this issue, and well, this is what I think about this issue, blah, 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 blah. But if it's just an informational text, can it go out and still abide by the open meetings rule and act even?
I mean, as you described, the answer would be yes. There's obviously risks and concerns with that kind of communication because if members started to communicate amongst each other in any way, not just by replying to the text about a subject that would fall under COMA, a business of the body, there would be some risk.
Risks that exist no matter what this rule says, because the language that Representative Smith's proposing to strike only pertains to majority whip, not the caucus of the majority party, who's potentially sending out these notices that you're talking about. Okay, further discussion on the substitute motion. Seeing none, Representative Smith, you may close.
I close, Mr. Chairman.
Heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. The affirmative, or those that wanting their votes recorded in the affirmative, Representative Heiberger, Representative Clayton. Are there any other amendments? Okay, so I would entertain a motion to, go ahead, Representative Clayton. Just looking at her, I just saw her over there. Representative Owens.
I make a motion that we pass out the rules as amended by the Rules Committee favorably.
Motion, is there a second? Representative Clayton, any discussion? Close. Heard the motion, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. I realize people need to go to committee at 1:30. We can do, well, let's talk through this really quickly. We also have the joint rules. Are there amendments on the joint rules that anyone has? Representative Heiberger has some. What's everyone's, how many? Several?
They're bundled together.
We have our joint committee.
Where are we meeting? In Supreme Court?
No, 582 more.
582.
Or judiciary. Yeah, they have committee in here that's got to come into.
Well, we don't need joint rules yet, I guess. Let me work on a schedule, and we'll come back for the joint meetings at some point in the future. So we've passed out the House rules. We'll meet at some point in the future on the joint rules. I'll let you know that when that is. So we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.